Well, kia ora, everyone. It's been really good to be part of the SFU conference, and after I got off the conference, had lots of emails and questions and things, and I thought, oh, well, let's just put this into a PowerPoint kind of presentation so people can watch again and maybe get a little bit more information that I can share as well. So I'm going to share my screen. And just talk through this PowerPoint. So yeah, like I said, kia ora. My name is Matt Cameron. I am currently a grief and loss coordinator in South Canterbury doing counselling and support work with different groups. My favourite is working with couples, but also I get energised and stimulated when I work with the area of grief and loss, and just seeing the resourcefulness and I don't know, strengths, for want of a better word, within the people that are coming through the program that I work with and carry on. So I think topic groups, because this is about groups, is defined by the problem that the group bring, and whether or not it's a marketing tool or because you want to do something that promotes a certain healing of a particular problem, then that's the way you work. It doesn't really matter which group it is. So I've been working with grief and loss for about 10 years, but I also just completed a group with some grandparents who have children who are addicts, and they're looking after the grandchildren, and they really needed support as well. And so going through a 5-week program with these grandparents was just finding, instead of focusing on the problem, we were looking at the nuggets of gold or the magic moments that they had, even if it was for 10 seconds. They listened to a bird or noticed a sunrise or something, and we focus on that and amplify the good feelings, the strengths, and the opportunities that they present as well. So problems only exist in the context of things being better. And I think that's where the solution-focused approach best fits, because everyone comes to us wanting something better. Whether they're sent there, they still want whatever they sent them to go, whoever has sent them to go away. And so they're there because they want something better. So whenever we talk about problems, we can also discuss something better. So using this as approach with a solution focus with a peer support program is also quite interesting, because it's like we're asking our best hopes as you've been trained in solution focused, but also we're adding a little educational element to that. And so that it makes the program, it limits the program. So if it's a 3-session group, or it's a 6-session group, or an 8-session group, you're governed by that, and that also offers hope to people because it's got an end in sight, you see. So we're asking people to join this program so that they can feel better. They want something better. What difference would it make if those things were? If better shows up, what would you notice? What would others notice? And of course, the best question in SF is what else? What else? What else? So we're asking in the group, what are your best hopes from our time together? Suppose this time together is helpful. Very presuppositional, it is helpful, not if it's helpful. And you're talking to a friend tomorrow about how helpful it was. What might you be saying? And we go around each person in the group, and it doesn't matter if there are different things that come up either. It's where we're getting something in sight of why they're there, I suppose, and really getting that, you know. So I might come with the idea that, oh, I don't want to be sad all the time, so I'm going to ask, what do you want instead? And suppose that showed up tomorrow, how would you know? What would be the first sign of it? How would you notice? What would you notice? And to get that idea of a concrete internal state as well, is I use this diagram, which is really helpful. So when I've had a husband whose wife had died of cancer, and you're saying, what are your best hopes from this group? Or suppose tomorrow you're talking to someone and you're saying how helpful it was, what would be the thing that would stand out for you? And he ignored the conventions, I suppose, and said, well, my wife would be lying next to me. She'd be alive again. I've had children say, well, my parents would be back together again and wouldn't be getting a divorce. And so instead of being shocked by that and thinking, oh no, how can I possibly help them get that? I'm asking a question that says, what difference would that make? So that external thing becomes more internal. So the husband was able to say, you know, if your wife was alive again tomorrow, what difference would that make? Well, I would want to get out of bed. And what else? I'd have goals for the day. And what else? I'd have confidence. Wow, okay, so suppose tomorrow you wake up and somehow, I'm not sure how, but that confidence has returned, the desire to get out of bed and get into the day was there again, despite your wife not being beside you. What would you notice? What would other people notice? What else? What else? What else? The child that says, I want my parents back together again, what difference would that make? Well, I'd be happy again. And suppose that happiness returned tomorrow or after this meeting. Somehow, not sure how, but that happiness that would be like your parents were together, but they're not together. What would you notice? What's the first thing that you'd notice? Etc., etc. The child that said, oh, well, if this was helpful group, what would you get out of it? I'd have $1 million. Wow. what difference would that make if you had $1 million? Well, I'd be able to buy anything I wanted. And what difference would it make if you could buy anything you wanted? Just repeating their words, using their words. What difference would it make? Well, I'd be happy again. Okay, suppose that happiness showed up tomorrow, that sort of happiness that had $1 million and could buy whatever you wanted. But you didn't have that $1 million. But the happiness was there. What is the first thing you would notice? So these are the sorts of things that come up when we're talking with these things and asking for their best hopes. There's sharing with each other. There's the confidence, the ability to look forward again, understanding grief. They want some sort of education about grief, relief about the past, being able to talk about it, to keep safe, motivation to do new things, to be able to relax, to see things differently, to be a happy parent, to feel supported in the group. So that's their best hopes. Confidence is something that regularly comes up, actually, and I'm curious to think about that when they say, I want to be confident again. And when you press in on that, it's really interesting to see what comes out. What would people notice if you were that confident version of yourself again? So what would we notice is the next question. So what are your best hopes? And then what would you notice if that became a reality? Suppose that happened. Well, I'd be relaxed. I'd be confident. And how would we know you're confident? What would I see? Because I want to pretend I've got a video camera. I'm filming your movements throughout the day. What would tell me? Well, my chin would be up. I would be smiling. I'd be initiating conversations, which is one there as well. I'd be having goals for the day. Those sorts of things come up. So yeah, plans for the day, goals for the future. I'd have a spring in my step. I'd be more level. I wouldn't be up and down with my emotions so much. I'd initiate conversation. I'd want to get up. I'd be content. I'd be happy. I remember a girl one time asked it, and I asked, what are your best hopes from our time together? And she just burst into tears and she was crying. I don't know. And it went on for about 20 minutes. And there's a group of 5 girls, very patient listeners. I'm sure they were thinking, just let it go, leave her alone. But I didn't, and they were respectful and listening, and we carried on. What would you know? What really, if this was helpful somehow, that you were talking to someone tomorrow and you were telling them how helpful it was? I don't know. And somehow we got to a point where she said, well, I wouldn't be sad all the time. So of course I asked, well, what would you be instead? I don't know. Well, so if the sadness wasn't there and you had something different, what would be there? I don't know. And somehow we got to the point where she said, well, I'd be happy again. And so then it became, okay, so what would you notice if that happiness came back again? I don't know, and carried on with this. What might other people notice? What would be a sign that this happiness was showing up? And eventually we got to this point, and I can remember thinking to myself, I could have prompted her. I could have said, would you be smiling? Would you be looking people in the eye? Would you have a spring in your step? Those sorts of things. Would you be less emotional or something? Those sorts of things that people have said in the past, but I didn't. And then she came up with the thing that said, what would be a sign that you would be happy again? Well, I would be initiating conversation, or I'd be talking to people again. I'd be starting the conversation. And I could, in a million years, I wouldn't have come up with that suggestion. And so I'm just so glad that she came up with it. And when I said to the group, so has anyone seen so-and-so when she's been happy and initiating conversation? And there was a couple of girls in the group said, yeah, I've seen her when she's on the bus, and she is so bubbly and talkative, and it's just it was a real encouragement. You could see the girl, 14-year-old girl, just raise her eyes and look at the group, and she was engaged again. And that's the sort of thing. And over the coming weeks, she really did come out of herself and change again. So an overview of the program. What we say in every session, basically, it is helpful. It's good to be able to talk about it. It takes that pressure that's inside, that grief that's there, and releases it in that sense more. And so this is kind of the steps that we have. Some of these combine into sessions as well, but this is kind of the basic step-by-step process. Naming the problem, or who's missing, and we talk about that, and sort of we talk about that in the first session of things that they enjoy, what have they got going on in their life that is working things, and then we talk about feelings, and these are all parts of just connecting with the people, getting their trust, earning the trust, and asking the question why. That we don't do that in the children's group, but we do it with the adults. Telling my story, listening to your story, and talking about memories, both good and bad. And then we sum up with these 2 sessions, or 3 sessions it can be as well, looking at changes that are going on in your life, both good and bad, looking at strengths and your values that you hold dear, that govern your emotions, that things that are real valuable to you. Your strengths often are things that upset you more. You see someone who's not so honest, and because honesty is a real key factor in your own emotions, your own values, then that's going to upset you more. People don't have good sense of humor, or they're dry. When you see someone being harsh or nasty or unjust, that will cause more emotion for you. So that's just an understanding educational side of things, and people really value those things. They also value that questions why. I should just say that's it's okay to ask why, and it's helpful to ask why. And if you come up with a reason, the research apparently has said that whatever reason, even if it's not true, then it's helpful. It helps you move forward in whatever you're dealing with. And so we do an exercise that looks at some pictures, and pick a picture that represents your problem. And then we talk about that, when have you had that before? What have you done to move forward through that issue? And what do people notice about you? All those kind of questions that you'd ask when you're coping. And then we get them to physically turn the picture 360 degrees, either way, that way or around, and look at it again and say, suppose when I said, pick a picture that represents your problem or your grief, instead I asked, and you picked that picture, but this time I asked you, pick a picture that represents your hope, and you went straight to that same card and you picked it, and you're looking at it now. What can you see that tells you about hope? And so that's an exercise that teaches you to look at situations from another angle, from a different perspective. And it's just incredible what comes out of that. that they start putting into practice. When one of the ladies in a group, we asked what's been better in a follow-up session, and she said nothing. My cat died. And this week, and it was my husband's, who had died 3 years before, her husband's favorite pet. And so she had a rough time, but she said, because it was after the session actually, and she said, well, I actually put into practice what we talked about. And I started to try and say, what good can come out of this? What's something that might be more helpful than the way I'm looking at it now? And she said, oh, actually, I can go and visit my sister in Christchurch because I don't have to put my cat in a cattery, because she didn't like doing that. She didn't like leaving her cat with somebody else and those sorts of things. And so she actually started to just put into practice those tools that we did. And then looking beyond is the next phase, looking at positives, how life is now, what life will be after Oceans, which is the name of the grief and loss program, and a celebration meal together. So this is sort of looks at the past, this part looks at the future. Although when you're going through this, there are futuristic questions and past resource gathering as well, but that's a basic breakdown. So when grief shows up, how are you coping? What are you most pleased about? How you handled that? How did you stop things? Just ask those really. And the thing is, when I'm teaching this skill and for facilitators to run this program, I'm really saying you need to look at the people in front of you as a superhero, that and have this mindset in the back of your head that, look, if I was going through this, I might not be coping as well as you, and looking at them with admiration. And so these are some helpful questions that we'd use. So helpful ways to live with your grief. This is just things that the group has come up with, and they share these things and they say, oh, actually, I could do more of that. And looking at the whole person as well is part of it. So what are you doing that's nurturing your spiritual well-being? What are you doing that's nurturing and growing your physical well-being, your family well-being, and your mental health as well? So looking at these sorts of things and saying, what is it that's doing that? So I'm equipping all four aspects. In New Zealand, we have a model that's called the Te Whare Tapawhā, that I could have as a slide. It's a shape of a house, and each wall and the roof represents an aspect of our well-being: the physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being. And so that's a really cool exercise to say, how am I, if there's something lacking, then my building will fall over. And so what do I need to do to balance my life again and ground myself? The educational side of it is, again, so supporting someone through grief. It's been said already, just being there, allowing them to talk about it, listening with an ear for opportunities, not for information, but for opportunities. Where they can tell their problem story, but I'm going to be listening for something that says, wow, how did you do that? What strengths did you bring that got you through that? You're asking open, solution-focused questions, caring and believing in them, looking for those gems, those magic moments, these little moments of hope. So we're in the group there not to solve problems, or we're not solving problems, we are finding solutions. And I think that's a good difference. So looking at this, just a little thing I like to think about, that listen and silent are spelt with the same letters. So we can know how's the best way to listen. Well, it's to be silent and not be afraid of that silence, not be afraid of those emotions that well up as well when they happen in front of us. And I like to add this bit as well, because my last name is Cameron, Matt Cameron, and yeah, being silent. And I just, because I said I like doing couples work well, so Cameron, anagram for Cameron is romance. So just a little joke there, but it's true. So maybe I should use that more in my marketing for couples work. So in the solution focused and group work, what do we need to do? We do have a contract that we start off with. We contract with each other that we're going to be, we have confidential process, will respect confidentiality within the group, then that means whatever's said in the group stays in the group. However, I always put a clause on this, because whatever's said in the group stays in the group. That's if it's other people's stuff. We want you to talk about your stuff. We want you to talk about the things that you're learning in this group. And I always say this, but don't talk about other people's learning and what they're doing. So it's okay to share your stuff, but it's not okay to share other people's stuff. So focusing on change and possibilities, creating goals, preferred futures, building on strengths, skills, and resources, being respectful and curious about change. And change is the thing that causes grief, significant change. And so we want to be curious about that. And how did you get through that? What resources did you build into your life and use and utilize to get through those difficult times? Have you been through difficult times before? Creating cooperation and collaboration. This is peer support. So I love seeing the nods and the agreements, and even sometimes the group start giving advice, and it's a nice thing to do, that you can sit back and go, okay, this would happen in real life. People like to give advice. They do learn the skill of saying, what would it be like, or what would you notice as well? But it's okay to, someone might say, look, I've really had a rough week this week, and I can remember this. I actually felt like taking my life. And one of the people in the group said, oh, you wouldn't dare. And it was just a nice, almost the reaction of shock was that would be a terrible thing for you, for your family. That would be a terrible thing for this group. And and we were able to have a safety talk about that and make sure those people were actually in a safe place before they left, obviously. Using humor and creativity. There's lots of cheerful laughter, of course, and fostering the facilitator and member connection. That's really important. That we are showing care and love in this process. When we're looking in these conversations, we're looking for signs that amplify hope, signs of connection, signs of compassion. Connection means their friend. They want to touch base with a friend. Or I'm going to amplify that if they say that, something they would notice. If they say, I'm thinking about helping out at a soup kitchen. Oh, that's incredible. That'd be amazing. And contribution is the same sort of thing. But compassion is, I like taking my dog for a walk. I like talking to friends as well, and listening to their problems or their stories, and that curiosity that looks forward as well. I wonder what it'll be like in 5 years' time, and if they start talking about those things, then I'm going to amplify that conversation as well. So the most important thing is that people don't remember what is said, but they remember how you made them feel, and that's fostering that connection within the group as well. So follow-up sessions, what is better since last week? What is better does not have a wrong answer. So we're not assuming they're going to come up with these rosy magic moments every time, but they'll be there if we push, right? But they might say nothing. Like I said, the lady who when we said what's been better, nothing. It's got worse this week because my cat died. So then I'm going to ask questions like this: what stopped it from getting worse? What's given you enough hope to come back and still want things to get better? And if they say that there has been something being better, then what is it? How did you contribute to that? How did you do that? And what did you notice about yourself that tells you that this could happen again, and those sorts of questions? So responding to those best hopes is wow, obviously, and we say it backwards, wow. How did you do that? What resources did you get? What was different about that if it hasn't happened before? What would be the first thing that you'd notice if your best hopes became the reality? And putting that word first thing as well is important. It doesn't make it so broad. It's those little details that make it more real. And those little details that make it more real is that connection with others as well. What do other people notice? And could you do more of that, obviously? So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me through my website, or there is a contact page there, which will email me, and then I can get back in touch with you. But I'd be pleased to do that, and maybe we can help more people around the world. All right, so take care. Ka kite anō.